December 27th, 2022. I'd like to call to order City of Laconia City Council meeting. Before we go any further, though, I'd ask if Councilor Felch would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We're joined by our recording secretary, City Clerk Katie Gargano, and I'd ask her to please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Here.
Counselor Susie,
Here.
Counselor Littman,
Here.
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
and Counselor Felch,
Here.
and Mayor Hosmer.
Present. We're also joined at council table by City Manager Kirk Biotti and Finance Director Glenn Smith. Agenda item 7, minutes of the regular city council meeting of December 12th, 2022 were distributed to the city council on December 22nd, 2022. With no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk, the minutes will be accepted as distributed. Moving on to item 9, citizens' comments for matters not on the agenda. If anyone here is present and would like to discuss a matter that's not on tonight's agenda, now would be the appropriate time.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, I'm here as a citizen concerned about what's happening with St. Joseph's Church, the building. It's gotten some interesting newspaper coverage lately. And I just want to clarify a couple of things. In the newspaper article, it was stated that, and I'm not involved with the Preservation Society. My wife is on the Preservation Society, Jane Wood, and Linda Normandin is here. She's also the president of that society. But I'm here on my behalf, not on their behalf. I just want to clarify a couple of things that were in the newspaper article. The first one is that the Preservation Society does not have the resources to fix the church or maintain the church. That's an assumption made by somebody, and I believe that assumption is incorrect. I think there are funds available and people willing to make that commitment. At least that's my understanding of the situation. The other thing is it's been over 3 years since this process began, and the Preservation Society has tried diligently to work with the bishop to try to get permission to fix the problems with the building. And there has been no response to date, other than it's going to cost a lot of money. Well, of course, if we'd been working on it for the last 3 years, it wouldn't cost anywhere near what it is going to cost now. So what can be done about that, and why am I talking to you about that? There is a statute that allows the city council to take action to protect a building such as this building. And they can order the owner of the building to repair it. Now, in this case, it would be more logical to say to the bishop, there is an entity that is willing and able to do this. Work with that entity, because we do not want to have that building torn down. We want to preserve it for its significant historical value to our community. Chief, I got to tell you, those lights are really something.
I wish I'd known that years ago when we were in court.
So with that in mind, I would like to, at some point here in the near future, make a more detailed presentation with regard to that statute and what I think the city council might be able to do to help preserve that building.
Patrick,
Yes, sir.
First of all, can you cite the statute?
Oh, that's
151B, I believe.
One,
RSA 151B.
thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Were you finished?
I am, unless you have any questions.
Questions or comments for Mr. Wood? Seeing none, thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for those of you who just walked in on the calendar, or on the agenda, we are on citizens' comments for matters not on the agenda. It's item number 9. If there are no other citizen comments for matters not on the agenda,
can I,
go ahead.
I just wanna, I know some people just walked in, I'm not sure, is there any of those items?
It's on the agenda.
It is,
Yep.
that's just what I was, oh, I see it. Thank you, Wayne.
No
Mr.
problem.
Mayor.
Moving on to number 15, which is the mayor's report. I'm going to refrain from making a report tonight, but we'll move along to council comments. Agenda item 16. Any council comments this evening? Go right ahead, Councilor Cheney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have a few items that I'd like to talk about, but the first, and at least to one of my constituents, I suspect for several constituents of concern, over the weekend, Layton Ave, a portion of Layton Ave had some problems with the drainage. One of the gentlemen pointed to where previous damage had been done to his driveway by it being undercut at a cost of several $1,000s to repair. And here was, and I have pictures, I'll send those around in a minute. Oh, never mind a minute. The water early on Friday evening, his driveway is directly across. You can see it's building to head towards his house. He called the police department. He made an attempt to call the Public Works Department, but he had the wrong number, and nobody answered. Well, then nobody answered because he had the wrong number. So that's not a criticism of them. But in any case, he called the police department. The police department put him in touch with the fire department. The fire department sent some people out, and they, in wading boots, when this ditch you see to the right of the line of snow is relatively 3 or 4 feet deep. They waded in there, got the leaves out of the grate, and drained off the water. I want to add to my comments tonight, I'm pretty proud of our fire department, who could have easily said, it's not a fire, and left. They didn't. Instead, they stayed, did the work necessary to make a temporary fix. And I know the gentleman called the Public Works Director. I'm hoping we can encourage them to look at this issue and propose some changes in the budget so that, or whatever costs may be associated with fixing this problem. I understand it occurred in other areas, but this is the one that I was asked to come and take a look at. So, again, this is a house on Layton Ave, a nice area of the city. As an interesting, at least to me, addition, the gentleman's appraised value went up $600,000 this year, and his tax bill went up $5,000, and he was hoping maybe some of that could go towards fixing this grate. The second thing I'd like to talk about, we've all seen the picture of the pickup truck hanging over the sidewalk over here by the mill. And I know we can't fix it right away, but I'd like the Public Works Department to know that I think should be looked at and a proposal made to widen that sidewalk so the handicapped or whoever can get by when the pickup trucks or whatever vehicle, I don't think it has to be just a pickup, backs up and hangs over the walkway. The last couple of things that I wanted to talk about tonight, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize, I know everybody wants to get out of here, but I had a conversation with our police chief with regards to the incident at the middle school that I think most of us are aware of. I tell you this because I think, and this reflects on the Public Works Department, on the Fire Department, different issues, but the same sort of thing. 30 years ago, when I ran the police department, we'd get a search warrant, go out and check the phone, check the house, check the car. Today, the Laconia Police Department, not today, but in this day and age, they had to draw 7 search warrants. And for those who are lawyers in this room, you know a search warrant isn't written out in 15 seconds. It takes a significant amount of time. You have to then go to a judge. He has to read it, he has to approve it, or make changes to it. So I wanted the council to know that as we start to look at fire budgets, police budgets, that a lot more, our fire department digs out a drainage ditch to keep a citizen from having damage done to his property. Public Works does, I think we all agree, a dynamite job of trying to maintain our streets, particularly in the winter. So, but I want folks to understand here and in the city that it sounds easy to say, well, why don't they just plow this sidewalk, or why don't they, stop using fire trucks for this function or that function? Why doesn't the police department respond more quickly? Times have changed dramatically, and these people are doing the best they can. And I just want to bring that up tonight for the council to think about and for the citizens to hear. In the midst of that, I want to tell you, there was a Christmas party for for folks at the PD, and they showed us their new command vehicle. The council should all go and see it. Ask the chief to show you that vehicle. It is impressive, given the fact it was gotten with grant money at no cost to the city. It's an impressive piece of equipment. And my last item, Mr. Mayor, hearing that sigh of relief, is all of us, I think, I know I did, received a letter from a constituent who asked, how come we're the only city or town that borders the lake that doesn't have a public boat ramp on Lake Winnipesaukee? And I wonder if we could maybe start looking at the possibility that's a fair, I mean, I know the boatyards are not going to be happy with me, but you know, it's a fair question, and I think we ought to spend some time looking into what can the city do. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the time. I mean that sincerely. I appreciate all of you listening to me when I know you want to get out of here as quickly as you can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Cheney. Are there any other council comments? Councilor Haynes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Just to kind of segue to what Councilor Cheney was talking about, I think we have some constituents who probably don't have fond memories of this Christmas, some of them having been without power and damage to their property. And I'd like to say that Addison Street was one of them. They had no power on the entire street, and I think compliments go out to the Public Works, who made sure the road was passable and sanded, for the fire department, for there was down wires everywhere, and for the PD to make sure everything was safe. And to those neighbors who helped out other neighbors, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Councilor Haynes. Moving on to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports this evening? Councilor Susie.
Under the Appointments Committee, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Cheney, Councilor Haynes, and myself met recently, earlier this evening, on some appointments to be made. And one was for the Planning Commission, one was for the Master Planning Commission, the other was Transportation. And we'd like to bring forward 3 names to be appointed to these commissions. One would be Rob Mora for the Planning Commission. And I'm bringing up the exact name. Robert Mora. The planning board.
Wrong one, they're trying to tell you.
I'm sorry.
Planning board for
Planning
Rob.
board, right.
Yep.
Wes Anderson to the Commissioner as Lakes Region Planning Commission, and Wes Anderson to the Planning Commission Transportation Advisory Committee. Those three we would like to bring forth to the council for approval.
So at what point would you like to move this? Like to move it now?
Yes, I'd like to move it now.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
So Counselor Susie makes the nomination, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Is there any further discussion on these appointments?
Are these the ones that were tabled at one time?
Two of them are.
Two of them were tabled, one is not tabled. One, the Robert Moore one was not tabled, that's initial one. The Wes Anderson, and there was one other person that were tabled, and we put Wes Anderson in it as the substitute for the one that was other tabled. It was,
I think
So
you're-
I'm just looking procedurally if they were
if
tabled.
they
It
were,
was done
yeah,
right.
Right.
they would have to come off the table first.
So the nominations are on the table right now?
I couldn't remember honestly until you brought up if they had actually officially tabled them or if we just put it through. So if they were tabled, which I believe you're correct, we'd have to have a vote to take it off the table.
And the other point is, should they be on an agenda in case a citizen wants to comment?
So I looked into that and I was told that we're okay to do it this way and move it forward through as long as the subcommittee, because the subcommittee was a publicly noticed meeting.
Okay, good.
All right, so right now we need
we need a motion to,
motion to take it off the table.
so moved.
Counselor Susie, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Although, any discussion? All those in favor? 5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. So we have a motion on the table right now for Rob Moore and Wes Anderson, ×2. Counselor Susie has made the motion, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. It's 5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Thank you, Wes, and thank you to Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Any other committee reports right now? Yes.
So the Finance Committee is meeting immediately after this meeting to work on options for addressing the sewer rate changes that we can do to mitigate the impact on current ratepayers.
Liaison reports. Any liaison reports this evening? Moving on to number 19, which is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. So if there's a current agenda item you would like to speak to, now might be the appropriate time. Tim, Scott, would you like to talk to?
They have.
You are, but you can speak to it right now because it's on the agenda. Don't be bashful. No, we're kind of intimidating.
Not as accused of, actually. Nothing. Anyways, wanted to take, actually, here's a few renderings for you. I'll just take them and pass around. I first wanted to thank you all for,
So, just so Katie knows,
Oh, hey, Katie.
introduce yourself.
Scott Everett. Nice to meet you, too. The Dallas guy, I think is I'm referred to around here. Those are just some packets on just a few things I wanted to talk about. First and foremost, thank all you guys and ladies for helping coming here. It's wonderful to finally get to speak in front of you. I'm sure there's a lot of hearsay about things I'm doing and not. So I kind of just flew up from Dallas because I thought it was an important meeting to attend. We're trying to get, this public-private sort of sector to work together. One of the things we're going to talk about is about the parking proposal that we have. As you all know, I'm just going to refer to it as 51 Elm. So you can see, well, there's a few in there, but I'll get you one that I was thinking about. To really sort of the rendering of it. If you've never seen it, it's in your packet. So the parking that we're talking about, and you're going to be proposed a plan for it, is down Railroad Ave, which is in between 51 Elm and the old fire station on Railroad Ave. That's that there. There's parking here and parking along there. And what we originally did when we built this was we burdened the cost of a 2-story parking garage in the back of the structure up Park Street. So we have about 45-ish, 60 spaces on our rendering that we have a park to the right behind the unit. what we're finding out is that as we, sort of COVID changed everything, as we know, when we started the project before. Now we're getting to the point that we have tenants that, we're getting ready to put in, retail, there's retail on the bottom floor, and then there's 2 units of residential above that. And one of the first things they're coming to us and saying is that we need sort of parking. We need sort of mandatory parking, at least during their business hours. So we're trying to accomplish that as one of the goals for the parking. Because the first question they ask me is, what do I have for mandatory parking? So I think we at some point we'll have a proposal a little bit more formalized, but that's really what we're here to talk about as regards to this side. The second thing is I wanted to just talk about some of the other things that'll come down the line, because I think they all sort of come into play. This is Doris Ray Court, which goes down into the O's parking lot, if you will. It's the right side where the city actually rents or uses for dirt and whatnot, for all the jobs they do, whatever. And then that's down there. And then this is sort of I had a plan done for taking the WOW Trail as it comes up Union now, and then it's gonna go all the way up Elm, and it's gonna connect to Franklin, et cetera, to widen that a little bit right there, and have a retaining wall put in up there. This isn't really about that. I'm just giving you an idea of some of the things that I'm thinking about for that area. I don't think this meeting's the right venue for that, but I just wanted to give you an idea of things that I'm thinking about for the future, and why my thoughts and visions around that whole area are to, add a little crosswalk in there for pedestrians. We spent a fair amount of time, effort, and money in developing a plan that would sort of revitalize that whole area, and I just wanted to share it with you so you could see why this side's important, because this side will come next. And there's a few other purchases that will be announced here in the coming weeks and months that sort of go into that whole plan as well. Yes.
I'm not sure the public may fully appreciate what is my left side of the drawing, which is how the current,
Oh, this side.
the
Oh, Doris Ray, yeah.
yeah, that side. I think what you've outlined there, where the trees are up almost against the road, is sort of creating another path, if you will, alongside, and creating some green space and use there along that corridor by taking part of the hill. Is that what I'm assuming you're doing there?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's putting a retaining wall on that side, widening it about 15 feet, and then putting a gazebo-like structure or something right there to have a nice turn, because it's a little tight right there. And, cities need sort of congregations area, so that was the plan that we talked about. Because I own obviously up here at Doris Ray, and we'd go all the way up that side as well, and then across the bridge, it would get narrower there for the 70 or so feet across the bridge.
And if I could just finish.
No, that's
Yeah.
what I thought you were done.
And so part of what is the embankment that's kind of steep going down, you'd be putting something in there to basically take
Yeah, like a
advantage.
retaining wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would, instead of it having to go like this, you'd put a retaining wall like this, and it would just go straight, and that's how we pick up the 15 or so feet.
Thank you.
Is that the continuation of the WOW Trail
It is.
that you're going up Elm Street that way?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And a little extra too in there. Because I don't know, I haven't seen the full plan. I think your existing plan today is to narrow that street there. And from someone that lives on that side of town and goes there anyways, it's quite, traffic, and particularly in the summer, is obviously getting way back. It's backed up across the bridge now, and it's really tight there. And someone that owns a business there, it's really dangerous, quite honestly.
So you're not looking at reducing the width of the street, you're looking at going further where the retaining wall into that parking lot?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I look at this, I think it's,
Lean right into the
I'm sorry.
microphone, too. And Counselor Cheney, go right ahead.
I just have a comment, and that is, this looks fascinating to me.
Awesome.
But if you want to sell me or anybody else, I'd take those last 2 photos in the group here and make sure you publish them everywhere.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But when you see this, you understand how that's going to look,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, this one's obviously up already, the elm.
You
Thank
know?
you, yeah. Yeah. Thank you, yeah, they came out nice.
Well,
It's
it
beautiful.
makes me feel more confident about what you're gonna do, seeing what you've done to these two monsters.
Yeah,
I think there used to be a barbering shop in the back, and.
There used to be, as, in our prior life, we had some serious altercations.
Oh, yes, we did.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, my grandfather actually had a dry cleaner there eons ago.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But, you know, the other duly noted is that I think there's some public opinion that I'm trying to rip down a lot of Lakeport, and that's just not the case. Those buildings on Elm Street were actually basically condemned when we took them down, and we did everything we could to restore them, actually. We brought in architects and everything else. I tried. It's just, they weren't. It's the same thing, you know, right up the street there, you know, on North Street there. So first and foremost is always try to restore, which we did on Harrison Street in the back, and we did to the Opera House, of course.
But that's why I say,
Thank
make sure
you.
you emphasize those two.
Thanks.
So when we get right to what the purpose that you're looking at this point is, the parking,
Yes.
okay? So at some point, will it be now, Mr. Mayor, or is it in the, when the item comes up on the agenda?
21. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll wait for the item to come up more for the, okay.
Yes. So I think what we see right here, what you've provided us, and this is great, very helpful.
Yep.
There are the spaces at the front of 51 Elm Street and along the side, which are on Railroad Avenue. Those spaces support the retail, commercial development of all the first floor at 51 Elm Street.
Correct.
The idea being, if you have an ice cream shop or a restaurant or something where someone may spend a half hour in or an hour, that parking is convenient to do business at those places, because if it's not convenient, people tend to get frustrated or drive around, and, you know, you want to make it as convenient as possible, correct? For people to park.
Correct. And with the other businesses going into, that's the first question I get always. And the second one is, if the WOW Trail continues its path like that, there's gonna be more people that wanna come right in there, and just a lot more, you know, folks all the time right in that area, which is our whole goal, so we bring people into the area.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I would make the observation that historically, the businesses that were there had parking to serve their customers. And I think what you were talking about was parking during business hours, that the spaces would be available outside of business hours for the public at large to use.
Correct. Absolutely.
It's good. Any other questions for Scott?
I'll wait till the agenda item comes up.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. This is great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks,
This
guys.
is
Appreciate all your time.
just really impressive. We're still on 19, which is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. Seeing none, we'll go right to the city manager's report. Item number 20.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just relatively short tonight. The project update, you have two documents with you in your packet tonight. One's the project update, and the other one is the monthly economic development report. Under the projects update, not a lot of changes from last month. Public Works is working on their paving schedule for next year. We haven't finalized any numbers on the budget yet, so we really can't make any decisions yet, but that's being worked on. Council Littman brought up that the Finance Committee will be meeting after this to discuss the sewer rates, which comes up under the Winnipesaukee River Basin project. And nothing else has changed. That's it on the project updates for this month, unless there's any.
I guess I have a request for you and the planning director for a future meeting, and to try to do this before we get into the budget process, is, you know, with the sale of the old state school property, that what we need to sort of load up on with respect to technical talent to deal with a development of the type that's proposed there, that it's certainly not gonna be a routine operation for us, and I think we're gonna need technical consulting support who've been through this kind of large development, and so would like to get your thoughts on what that might look like, so that we can sort of comment on that before we get into the deep into the budget.
Yeah, and the planning director and I have already met on this topic to discuss what options we could have, so it's, you know, the most feasible to make sure we are getting all we need out of it. So we're working on that, and we'll have something to present to you.
Great, thank you.
The economic development report is out. Again, not to say it again, but there's not really much for changes. You see the unemployment rate is relatively in line with the state and county numbers. On the second page is the CPI numbers. Looking at what our potential December could be, anything above 6.3% is gonna leave us right at 8%. So I think we'll annualize out at 8% this year, barring something crazy happening. We'll be right at 8.0, 8.1%. I know it's not on this, but because it's a tax gap number in there, if you remember the last month, our building numbers are also at or above what we were last year. So we're gonna see that play out very similar to what we saw last year. The only other thing I have is that we talked about this at the last meeting, was the expression of interest at the parking garage. We do have all of our legal questions answered now. We're working on the draft. It will be ready for you ahead of the January 9th meeting. So that we made good progress with that, and it'll be coming forward very shortly.
Thank you, Kirk.
That's
Any
all I have.
questions for Kirk on what he's presented? Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 21, under new business. As we know, Scott Everett of Paugus Properties has requested the city council explore parking options in connection with the development at 51 Elm Street in Lakeport. The project, scheduled to open in the spring of 2023, will consist of a 40,000 square foot or more building, which will feature covered parking, condominiums, and first floor retail shops, as well as co-working spaces. So I'll turn it over to you, Scott. We've all been briefed this evening on proposal and the ideas, and I know we've been trying to explore a couple of options here that might make sense that we should consider.
I think you were not referring to Scott, but.
Oh, Kirk.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard Scott. I was waiting for him to come up.
Sorry about that. I was thinking,
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard the briefing. As the 51 Elm Street is nearing its completion, Mr. Everett and his team came to my office first, and then to some of you individually, just to speak on, as this is completing, his businesses are gonna need certain parking spots and some dedication to them. So his businesses will have what they need for parking. We discussed a couple different options and locations, and we do have some answers from that through our legal counsel. I guess I'll wait until the presentation, and then I can answer any questions you may have directed towards that.
so say that again. We have received a memo.
We did receive a memo, and it depends on the direction as to what the request is.
Okay.
Whether it be leasing, whether it be exactly where. I mean, I can go through that with you now, or we can wait and see what the exact conversation is through Mr. Everett to decide where you would like your answers to go.
Okay. So I think what's important here is that, I mean, this is all important, quite frankly. The depth of investment in Lakeport, in these buildings, in the infrastructure in that area, I think finding ways to support entrepreneurs doing work like this in an area is important. I think we've had a couple of discussions. We just want to make sure that we're setting a proper precedent here. And so I'd be interested in ideas from counselors. I know Counselor Lippman had suggested an idea. I'm wondering if you're willing to sort of just give us a 10,000-foot view.
Sure. So, as I mentioned a few moments ago, that if you look at the historic use of parking around the buildings that were there, they were primarily used by individuals accessing the various businesses there, whether it was the convenience store, hairdresser, tattoo parlor, so on and so forth, the restaurant. And so, in my view, that what's being proposed here could be viewed in much the same manner, that rather than being, if you will, multiple owners of properties, we have one owner of the property intending to use it in much the same way. I think in terms of setting a precedent, I think we should structure this to be different. And I think that the difference would be, is rather than the parking, for example, we've associated with the Colonial as an example, where we leased it sort of permanently to the folks that they had 24/7, 365, is that we look at a proposal that would limit the use during ordinary business hours, and that we'd want, even if it remained the way it was today and we were doing construction on that area, that we'd want the businesses to be able to have access to customers. And so that we wouldn't be giving exclusive use to the parking spaces, we'd be giving partial use to the parking spaces, and that there'd be some exchange of related to putting that into place is basically the proposal that I would suggest that we look at. And I agree with you, it's important to partner with individuals who are willing to make investments in the city that wouldn't otherwise happen on their own. You know, the Colonial is a good example. That would have never happened if it relied on just one party. You know, when we did all the major projects that we can think of have had some sort of partnership that's been involved here. You know, the major investments we made in the Weirs have resulted in some new businesses being able to set themselves up there. You know, even when you look at the high school projects that we were able to accomplish, that we had, you know, some special financing support from the state that's no longer available, and we had some special financing support from the federal government that's no longer available. And I think that when we look at, you know, trying to build the strength of the city in terms of having economic diversity, and you know, this is the type of thing I think we have to get a little bit outside our comfort zone, but not set a precedent that is something that we couldn't replicate. When we should be doing something, if you will, totally special, that is sort of a sweetheart deal to one, and I think what I'm laying out there wouldn't be that.
Mr. Mayor?
Counselor Susie.
The only question I have for Scott would be, or Kurt, either one, the spaces that are in the lower level or the upper level parking garage, those are directly related to the units, right? That's not,
Those are your tenants?
Those are for the condos.
Those are for the
condominiums.
condo
those are for the
tenants.
condos, those are not, those,
The top floor is, there's two floors there. The top floor will be for the, designated for the units themselves.
Can you come up to the mic?
Come on up to the mic.
Yeah. The top floor is designated for the units themselves, the bottom is public.
the bottom is public.
Yeah, so there's
Okay.
about 23, 4 spaces down there as well.
Okay, so to expand upon the question, in the evening, let's say something's going on at the Opera House, or even Fratello's or the O or whatever, those spaces would be open when these other businesses might be closed.
Yeah,
Okay.
all of them.
I knew that was be a question, that's why I wanted to make sure it's
Yeah,
clear.
it's only the top, we put a gate on the top unit, so the residents will have gate access there. The bottom's just totally open at all times.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You know, when we set up the TIF district in Lakeport, one of the options that we set that up for was, the rationale was to find new parking capacity there, and I think Mr. Everett and his team are bringing some additional capacity to allow for the development around that TIF district. And, you know, I think it's consistent with the original objectives of trying to create a more available economic heart of the Lakeport area.
Bring in jobs too, because people are gonna work in those other
Yes,
areas.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, in reading the memo from legal today, I think left me more confused than,
What memo, though?
I think it left me more confused than it gave me clarity. And I don't, my concern on this is I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. I think if this is narrow in scope, you know, determining who's got the right of way and who owns the ground underneath the parking spaces, you know, I think that gets, I don't know if we need to go down that route, and I think they were making it more complicated than it needed to be here.
Right, so just, the memo came from, I had some legal questions to make sure I was prepared for, you know, for whatever Mr. Everett was gonna come forward with. So that, the memo was something I was working with with the, with our legal counsel. And yes, basically what I asked them for was, give me all the directions that this could go. And what is being suggested, what's being talked about is very simple. As far as what I asked them gets into the weeds of all kinds of different options. What's being looked at, I think, is relatively simple that we can get drawn up, easy for you to review.
So I think this is structured, and Henry, correct me if you have a different opinion on this. This is probably a term lease for a nominal amount for these spaces, with an element of that lease being exclusive use during normal business hours.
I think that's pretty close to what it is. I think it probably could even be, with a conversation with council, we might be able to bring something back that, I haven't seen the memo either, but I think generally what we're really doing is, if you think about the downtown, we have parking lots that we've bought to allow businesses to be able to thrive down here. In this instance, what we're basically doing is reusing spaces that have been there, plus spaces, and allowing businesses to have access to them during business hours. In terms of how we need to like, for example, another example that you can see in the city is that we put 15-minute parking in front of the spa next to the police station. We didn't enter into a specific business arrangement, but based on the smoke shop and the spa being available, we wanted to make sure those businesses could exist. And I think similar here, what we're really looking at, and there can be more to it than just what we did at this, because that's just 3 or 4 spaces.
Right.
But I think something that builds on that kind of concept, that these spaces are available for during the business hours to be able to have commerce. And it's not that it's being dedicated to anyone's particular use. It's anybody who wants to come in and do business, right? Which could be residents of Lakeport, could be residents of the city, could be residents from other parts of the state, or even out of state, that want to, spend their money in Laconia and support the community. So I think just understanding the total picture, and whether, for example, there may be things that Mr. Everett and team may be willing to provide, for example, like plowing those spaces, or maintaining that. We may want to take those things into consideration in terms of what we do, in that he does not own the spaces.
Right.
He has use of them during the business hours, like we have set up in other parts of the city.
Counselor Susie?
My question was exactly what Henry mentioned, was the maintenance of the plowing, the sanding, the sidewalks, all that kind of stuff. Is that something that your team would take care of?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And think about historically, that the guy who owned the convenience store used to take care of his spaces.
When we did the same thing with Michelle DuPont that owns O-Pee-Chee Inn, when we had to do shared parking there for her, and we maintained the sidewalks, we put in new lights, we did everything there. We did that when we opened the Opera House, so we're fully prepared.
I just want to thank you, because I think this is awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, and it's
Counselor Cheney, you have a question?
I do, and first I want to say I'm impressed. A couple of things. One, I know you've sort of alluded to there are legal issues about how much he may own or whatever. What impresses me is he comes in here and says, he didn't say, I'm saying, he could fight that battle, maybe win it, who knows? But he's willing to come in here and negotiate with us, and I'm impressed with that. The other part of this, though, is I'm not sure that we shouldn't do this without a public hearing, without an opportunity for people.
we need it.
Yeah.
We need that.
Oh,
That's good.
definitely.
So I think that ideally, if you can synthesize what we have discussed, Kirk, and put it on the agenda for January 9th for a public hearing.
Yep.
All right, and, and then we could take it up for a vote on the 9th if we wanted to as well, assuming that we had we were satisfied with the questions being answered.
I guess I would like for there to be some council input into the agreement before it goes to the public hearing, so that we have something that we're
Yes.
putting out there that we're comfortable at the public.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I don't know if we want to turf that to a subcommittee to work with after the manager puts together something that sort of incorporates that, to work with one of our subcommittees, be it Public Works or Finance or whichever one, and then that we bring something on the 9th that has had some level of vetting.
Okay, so.
I'm fine with that.
So, before we're done this, we are in discussion.
Yeah.
Sure, most of you know that I'm against this. I've also heard from constituents that are against this. It's a public area, should be public parking. They don't really see how a lot of people are gonna be parking there that aren't going into that building anyhow. There's not a lot around there. Maybe look at time limits for parking, couple hours, just like we do downtown. Possibly metered parking, which I think we need to look at downtown as well. And I also look at the fact that we looked for an easement on Park Street and were denied that easement, so we could take over Park Street, which is a private road right now. We'd like to take over as a city. So I just really don't think it should be basically private parking is what you're saying. What the condominium put, how much money into that building that they're in? Should all the parking in front of their building be just for them? I mean, we're opening up a can of worms. If we start doing it for one, we gotta do it for the other.
Already done it for one.
And I was against that as well.
Okay.
I guess I see your perspective, and I'm not discounting it. I guess what I'm saying is that the downtown businesses have benefited from the fact that the city has bought a lot to allow for businesses. There's parking in front of the buildings that, time limits may be an appropriate thing, appropriate suggestion to include there, because I'm sure that the businesses that are gonna be in that building are gonna want some turnover anyways, right? So I think, those are all legitimate. That's why I think it's important. While we may not agree in the end, to at least get your input on things.
Sure.
Yeah, on that too, we also built the garage, and we have 12 other spaces. We have 36 spaces that we're also, basically making use for anyone in the public as well. So we're trying to give back on that front too, and we did build that 2-story garage there.
Can we talk to him later about this garage over? Yeah, I'm sorry, never mind.
So, what I would like to do, Kirk, is to get this in the hands of legal counsel tomorrow for some draft language that would then go to,
Do you want this to go to Public Works, or do you want this to go to,
I'm gonna send it to, finance.
We could do it jointly with Public Works. I mean, we could have a meeting of the whole as a subcommittee, right?
I'm gonna send it to finance, and I'm going to ask, Counselor Susie if you could, fill in for Counselor Hamel on finance for this matter.
well,
Okay, so we can get some language and get it to,
We'll get some language
Sure.
and we'll set a meeting up,
Before
as
January
early as we
9th.
can before the 9th, as soon as we get it back from, they know I'm gonna be coming forward with it, they just don't know what direction we wanted it to say. So we can get that set up.
all right, that's what I'd like to do. Okay.
Before you break from this, could you just do a motion and a vote to set it to a public hearing? If that's what you're choosing to do.
I'll move that.
So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion to this going to a public hearing? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed, 5. Affirmative, that motion passes. So that'll be the schedule. We'll be working on it between now and the 9th with the idea, if everything comes together, it'll be voted on the 9th.
Perfect, thank you.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 21B, granting an easement on city land. I know Dean Trefethan is here. Would you take us through this from a 10,000 foot?
Sure, Kent. Good evening, councilors and Mr. Mayor. Let me just pass this around real quick. As you may or may not know, a few months ago, the zoning board and then the planning board approved a 90-unit apartment complex on Province Street in the old, one of the old sand pits that are there. As part of the approval, the developer is required to have 2 entrances, exits to the property. One is because of the number of units, fire code requires a second egress. And then the second aspect of that is that from a planning perspective, we were trying to disperse traffic in 2 different directions as opposed to having all the traffic in and out on Province Street. Some of it, we are hoping a significant part of it will go out Growth and then use Hounsel to go to Guilford or to the bypass or, you know, those kinds of things, to taking the pressure off of Province Street. So that's the idea behind this. So directly behind this piece of land is, I'm not sure the name of the park, I'm not even sure that it has a name, but it's the piece of land between the end of Spruce Street and Growth Road. The dog park is on part of that land. The dog park is near Growth Road. Their second driveway would go from their apartment complex up through the city land, basically along the power easement that exists already, and connect with Growth Road. And then they would create a driveway to the dog park off of their driveway, so that we only have one driveway coming off of the cul-de-sac on Growth Road. They would build this driveway at their expense. They will maintain this driveway year-round. They will plow, they will pave, they will patch, et cetera, and they will provide access for people to go to and from the dog park off of Growth Road. Be happy to answer any questions.
Council Susie.
And when I look at Growth Road, and then I see the curve come around back towards the apartment complex, I see mentions of Cape Cod, bedroom, are there already houses on there?
No, this is all,
No.
this is,
Cape Cod berm, I think it says,
Yeah,
right?
it's a Cape Cod berm,
Oh,
which is a
berm,
type
okay,
of
I'm
curbing.
sorry.
Yep, nope, that's all right.
So in Growth Road, I'm trying to, I don't know where Growth Road is.
It's a little cul-de-sac off of Hounsel that goes towards this piece of land. There is currently a business at the end of the cul-de-sac, and it provides access to the land that's a little bit further off of Hounsel than would allow, you know,
Okay, so
normal
the
access.
Growth Road connects to Hounsel Ave?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Council Littman.
Are you looking for action on, in a concept? Are we gonna see a written easement draft up the terms and conditions of that?
We have a proposed easement of the language of the easement. It would be recorded, at the registry as an easement that the city is granting to this developer to essentially create this driveway and then have it for as long as they need to have it.
I guess I'm in support of it, just to sort of lay it out, but I guess, you know, what is the standard in which the road's gonna be built to? Is there a performance bond in terms of that? You know, in terms of, you said there's maintenance, what, is there specifically outlined in the easement sufficiently to, all I'm trying to do, make sure is that we've got a good legal document to support what you presented.
This document was prepared by the Mitchell Group.
Notwithstanding that it was prepared by the Mitchell Group, there are documents that they shared with us before that we have input on. I just want to make sure that we have time to make sure that all those kind of nitty-gritty things are
Yeah,
to
well,
the
this is.
standard that we're looking to.
It's kind of a two-tier thing. So there's the legal aspect of the easement, and then there's the planning board approval, which spells out that they're going to have this driveway, and that they're going to do it at their expense, and they're going to maintain it so that their tenants can.
I guess I'm trying to take us beyond the generality in terms of, it's gonna be built to this XYZ specification. It's going to be plowed at this interval, not just that, and that the use of the road is as a secondary means of egress as opposed to, is intended to be the main means. It's the finer details so that, you know, later on, we're not, our future councils aren't saying, yeah,
We have a plantation in those areas where we have nothing to stand on, and developer walks away. I have another question too, Henry, when you're done.
Was that a question you posed to Dean that you were waiting an answer on, or not?
I guess I'm asking that, that be developed a little bit more concretely than what is there,
Okay.
because none of what I just sort of said, I don't think is in the document. It's more of a general legalese for granting an easement, not, for example, whatever spec that we specifically have for building of the road. We don't want something that's gonna fall apart later on. I think we're looking for, if they're gonna build a road, we want it to the normal city standard.
Counselor Susie?
When I look at this from Growth Road, where they want to build this road, so we're giving a city easement, does that preclude us or any future development around that? Because there's not room for other people to ask for an easement or buy the land from us or anything?
Where the proposed driveway would come off of Growth Road, on the, as you're looking at the plan, the right-hand side of the road, there is really not any availability for any development because there's a power line easement there. So there's nothing going to happen
There are no,
underneath the power line anyway.
there are no lots in the business park that.
There are no lots in the
would abut
business
that.
park. If you wanted to extend the business park, say, into where the dog park is, you know, relocate the dog park or whatever, you could certainly reconfigure this driveway or reconfigure the road to do that if you wanted to do something. Or do some type of city improvement or whatever in what is now the dog park area. There will be a driveway that will be available for people to use, for the
And
public to
just
use.
to relate to what Henry said, excuse me, Councilor, I want this to make sure this road is built to Wes's standards. So then we're not left with the situations like we have in other areas of the city, where the developer walks away and the roads were not built to city standards.
Counselor Cheney?
I would ask that Dean get this in front of the planning board for that portion which the planning board has authority over and outline these requests. I fully support, I think everybody here knows how I feel about getting things in writing. I think the planning board, the planning department could outline all of these things that Henry and Bob are concerned with in your portion, in the planning board's portion of these negotiations, and get them all in writing. If they want a planning board approval, they're gonna have to say they'll do all the things that Henry and Bob are suggesting. Is that a reasonable?
I think that we could take a proposed easement and then conditions of the easement to the planning board. I mean, the project is approved, it is already approved. However, certainly this is it's a condition of their approval that they create this, A, have this easement, and B, create this driveway. And so to put legitimate conditions on that is certainly a reasonable request, yes.
I want to echo what my brother councilors have said. We need something firm in writing that we know 10 years from now, the next couple of councils won't have to struggle with, get it done now properly. I think the planning board and the planning department can do most of that.
Yep, I agree. I mean, we are, just to be clear, this is a driveway. However, most people will look at it as a private road, and I do recognize the issues that we have with a number of private roads in the city, and part of it, not all of it, but part of it is related to, at the time the roads were created, we collectively did not do a good enough job of delineating exactly what this road was gonna be down the road. And one
And
thing
that
that
just
we've.
reinforces what is.
Absolutely, and one thing that we've done in the past few years is when developers have come in for their various subdivisions and everything, is we have nailed down, this is a private road, this is a public road, what is it gonna be? And we make sure that condo docs, homeowner associations, whatever, have explicit language that says, this is a private road, it's yours, not ours, ever, type thing.
But that could go sour somehow,
It could,
and at least let's have it to the dimensions
Yep.
and standards we'd like.
can do.
So it would seem to me right now, this is not ready for a vote.
I had one more request.
Please.
Mr. Mayor.
I would not have a problem voting on it as long as we put the stipulation in that this is built as, to the standards of a city road and maintained standards of a city road by the developer.
I'd like to add one more thing on that.
I don't want to delay this project from being done any more than we have to.
Counselor Susie?
To me, if I look at my dimensions correctly, and I could be way off, this is somewhere between 300 and 400 feet, if not longer, okay, which to me is a little longer than a football field, okay?
Correct.
I'd like to make sure we have some lighting in there. There's drainage that we always suffer up in the Weirs area, okay?
Yep.
And everything else, because I could see that kind of road being dark at night, okay? And I think Councilor Cheney and myself go back and say, that's scary.
Okay.
Okay.
Counselor Lippman?
Can you address the councilor question about is taking one more meeting going to impact the start of the project?
No. If we, instead of doing a public hearing on the 9th, if we waited to the 23rd, I don't see that as being an issue at all for the developer. I'm not getting a feeling that the answer here is no, it's yes, but with some conditions, and I think that's reasonable and to be expected. We are currently reviewing the building plans. We will be issuing a building permit relatively soon, within a week or so. I'm not expecting that they're going to be doing significant construction immediately. The ground's frozen, et cetera, although you can pour concrete in the winter these days. But certainly, it does not prevent them from starting by using access from Province Street. And then at some point in time, they have the secondary access.
That raises another issue for me in terms of, I don't fully appreciate maybe the construction there, but if all the construction vehicles are gonna be coming in this way in terms of any issues with Growth Road that are the result of their heavy equipment going on, because we have had to make repairs on the Hansel Avenue as a result of heavy equipment. So again, that maybe that's not an issue at all, but that's another thing that comes to mind here.
Certainly is something to be concerned about. However, I would probably be more concerned about Province Street than I would be Growth Road, just because of age and that kind of factor.
Right.
I guess whatever we need to do to
Yeah,
reasonably.
I mean, we do collect site security so that if they were to go belly up, we have a way of buttoning up the project. It's not enough money to finish the project. That is not the intent of the site security, but it is to button it up so that it is safe, secure. And if there had been any damage to any public infrastructure, we could repair that if they hadn't already done that. So I do have that mechanism.
What's your preference here? I guess you have a conditional yes, but we need specificity.
well-
So,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you choose to move this forward through your three motions and just change the date from the 9th to the 23rd of January, that'll give us a month to button up your, through the planning board and planning department, and then through our lease agreement, we can have a more solid document that answers your concerns.
that's fine with that. All right. Thank you, Dean. So, a series of 3 motions here. The first one is to, a motion to move to waive a reading of this request for an easement in its entirety to read by title only. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Looking for a second motion to move a first reading of a request for an easement on city land as presented. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 5 votes in the affirmative. And finally, a motion to move to schedule a public hearing on January 23rd, 2023, during the regular city council meeting to gather input prior to any action being taken. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. And I believe that concludes the city council meeting for this evening, to adjourn at 8:06 PM.
The finance committee, please stand back.